Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast on social media and tag me in it at JBertFit. Today's guest is the incredible Cathy Heller, a renowned teacher, best-selling author, and host of one of the top spiritual podcasts, Abundant Ever After, with over 45 million downloads. Cathy is a master of the law of reception and a thought leader on the universal principles of manifestation. Her work empowers people to unlock their highest potential, break free from self-doubt, and create a life of abundance, joy, and purpose. Get ready for an inspiring conversation filled with wisdom, practical tools, and powerful insights that just might change the way you see your future. Cathy Heller, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
It's really nice to be with you. I just got to spend a few minutes just really taking in your courage and your story. And I can see why people really love you instantly, because you're just a really kind, very humble person.
Thank you for that. That's unexpected. You're going to make me cry in the very beginning. That's not cool. Don't do that. And that's what I think is really great about your book is the fact that it came to me in a time period of my life where I'm struggling through some of my own challenges with creating a business and building wealth, and then creating that relationship, a better relationship with what that actually means. Like, how can I bring in this abundance? How can I allow myself to feel that it's even okay to have any of that? And so I'm going to ask you for the first question is just, what was your inspiration for writing Abundant Ever After? And what do you want readers to take away from it?
It's a beautiful question. The reason I wanted to write this book with this message is because having done my podcast for 8 years and spoken to many people, the thing that always comes up is that people want an abundant life. They want to have more material wealth. They want to be thriving. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's because your soul knows that you were designed to thrive. I think every redwood tree is designed to thrive. Every eagle is designed to soar. There's nothing in nature that's designed to be in lack, right? Everybody wants to create abundance in their life. And I wanted to write this book because I had a hypothesis of what I believe is the way to create that. And when you said the second question, which is what do you want people to walk away with? It's really what I think is like the foolproof way to creating the most magnificent life. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, in detail. And I'm happy to go into that now, but I could give you the whole sort of how do I think that we create abundance? I'm happy to dive in.
Yeah, and we absolutely will. But with what you just said, I think a lot of people, we think it's not available to us. Like the
Right.
abundance just isn't there because we don't have access to it. We can't see it. Yet for a lot of people, you have this innate burning desire and you know that it exists. And you hear a lot of people say it exists because future you actually already has that. And even though you might not see a path to it yet, there is that potential that's existing and it's nudging you in that direction to build and cultivate that for yourself.
Yeah. If I was holding up right now a tiny little olive tree that was just like a sprout in a tiny little pot or little like pot, then there is a knowing in that plant that it's meant to outgrow that pot. Not from a place of wanting more than it should want, but from a place of living into its design, right? It's designed to outgrow that pot and find a place in the earth and take root and really spring forth an abundance from itself. So are we. So it's not what's wrong with you that makes you think that you're designed to have more. It's what's right with you. And all of us are wired to actually receive an unlimited amount because each of us is a part of the collective whole. And every time one of us is thriving, it actually gives life to the rest of the collective. Like if you were to look at a garden and you were to see a plant that was growing weeds, anyone who knows anything about gardening would very quickly try to correct that because it would eventually bring that same kind of overgrown like disease to the rest of the garden. But conversely, if there was something in the garden that was alive and pollinated and beautiful, it's going to give life to the entire ecosystem. And so too, if I were to be thriving and I walk down my street and I'm feeling good and I'm like just this person who's beaming energy and goodwill and love, it affects my neighborhood. If there was somebody at the end of my block who felt horrible and eventually created a meth lab in his backyard, like that also would eventually affect the whole neighborhood because we're all one. And if I were to design my house and upgrade it and make it more valuable and paint it and make the whole front of it gorgeous, I would immediately have just made my neighbor's house go up in value, right? Because it's literally all oneness. And so money and any resource, whether it's love in your life, whatever the blessing is, it's meant to become what is a possibility then. It opens up possibility for everyone around you. And so the more that we receive, the more we give. The more we receive, the more we give. And that infinity sign, it goes like this, like a figure eight around and around. Because just like blood pumping blood, the heart pumps blood to the heart takes in fully and then fully gives it back to the body. And every single time any one of us has a full cup, then that joy that you bring into Starbucks, you just made somebody else's day better because you're in overflow. So we're meant to be in overflow, and whatever resource we have, whatever energy we have, whatever goodness we have, becomes a blessing, not just to us, but it becomes a blessing to the world. And so, on behalf of the world, why would you want to have less when you could be showing the way and paving the way and providing so much to the rest of us by fully standing in your most abundant self?
I think for a lot of us, we become conditioned to a certain way of being. And when my cup starts to get filled, it makes other people feel like I'm taking too much, or it bothers them in some way. It actually makes them feel worse to see someone else be successful that came from similar circumstances from where they came from. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's because if you're coming from the place of your ego, all right, you're coming from lack, you're coming from your story about yourself being unworthy, and you see somebody else thriving, then it's very triggering because you think, how dare they feel worthy? Because I don't. It's very confronting, right? But maybe you triggering someone is a blessing. About 4 years ago during COVID, a friend of mine, she made a declaration that she was going to get off Instagram for 6 months. And I saw her say this on Instagram and
I love those. Yeah.
I took my phone and I threw my phone against the wall because I was so mad at her. Like, how does she get off Instagram? Like, we're both podcasters, we're both breadwinners in our family. How does she get to take a break? And then I realized, oh, she is not doing something wrong. She is triggering me because I'm thinking, who the hell is she to give herself permission that I want to give myself? And then I decided, you know what? I have 3 kids at home. There's COVID. My husband's mom was dying. I'm like, I'm also going to get off Instagram. And I thanked her for triggering me because her giving herself a permission slip, I was like, good for you. I'm going to give that permission slip to myself. So that's why. It's because at the end of the day, our real power is our spiritual power, right? The most impressive person is not the person with the most money. The most impressive person is the person who's the most loving, who's the most creative, who, when they come into a room, everybody else feels tapped in and turned on all of a sudden. Everybody feels so awake. So when you come from that kind of place, you're encouraging other people. When you're really tapped in to who you really are and you see somebody else thriving, if anything, you're just inspired. It's only the moments where we're not in our spiritual power. We're in our mind, we're in our amygdala, that story, that lack, that cortisol, that stress that feels so gross, right? And that's what the mind does. That's why people like going on mushrooms. I've never done mushrooms, but what I've learned about the science of it is that it quiets your amygdala, it turns off your fear story and opens up your third eye so you go into oneness consciousness. The beauty of the book I wrote and what I'm trying to share in the book is that you can move into that oneness consciousness instantly. You don't need to do mushrooms to do that. You can start noticing your thoughts. You can start putting your feet in the ground and taking walks in nature. You can start rewiring the program, the software in your mind. And eventually you don't even find it compelling. Eventually you override that unconscious fear drift and you move into something that's so much more sound of mind, that's so much more beautiful. And that's when you start to manifest the most amazing synchronicities because you're such a net positive energetic vibration at that point that everything good wants to be around you.
And it's not just that, you get to that place where you're no longer looking for permission from others to be
Yeah.
more of who you are.
I love that you just said that. Yeah, we took the kids to see the Wicked movie. Everyone's watching now, and We've all seen Wizard of Oz, and it really is so cliche because the things that are most cliche are the most true. And the things that are most cliche are the things that we just don't get the message. So we have to hear it all the time. But there is no Wizard of Oz. You are the wizard. I say to people in this book, like, you are the mystic. Like, you have the power inside of yourself to tap in and turn on flow state. Like, Michelangelo was in flow state. Michael Jordan was in flow state. Tom Petty was in flow state. They all had different gifts, but they got into flow. We can measure when a person is in flow. Their brain goes into gamma. Their brain speeds up. When you're in lack and fear, your brain slows down. You're like molasses. You can't get anything accomplished. When you're in creative flow, you're not overthinking it. You're just, something is just moving you to the next idea, the next idea, the next. That's really the most abundance you have. And the truth is, every $1 billion ever created came from flow state. It came from creative, that wizard inside of yourself. And so to not harness our genius that we actually have that we can tap into and just sit our whole lives inside of the mind where there are no answers. They now know that wisdom is not in the mind, it's in the heart. Einstein said that the mind, if anything, it should be used as an antenna to pick up a frequency that doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the infinite field. And we recently at Columbia just did a bunch of fMRIs on these monks' brains. And we saw that a monk who's been meditating for thousands and thousands of hours, there was zero brain activity because the wisdom of the monk doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the heart. So we saw that their prefrontal cortex, the front of the head, was this prefrontal cortex because of their meditation, which quieted the mind. So there was nothing. And this prefrontal cortex, which is where your third eye is, allowed them to have insight, which comes from within. So their capacity to light up compassion and wisdom and love was like endless. And there were no answers in the brain. The brain is actually not there to give you insight. It's there to protect you. So all it's going to do is tell you all the worst case scenarios, what's in it, why you're not enough, because it doesn't want you to be vulnerable, because it doesn't want you to get hurt. It's this old program. And it's so limiting because we've all come from parents and grandparents and their problems and what they passed down. And the mind is the software chip, and you're running that program. You can rewrite that program. That program is not even you. You're so much more than that story. That story is so fake.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your own journey toward abundance and how it shaped your approach to manifestation and self growth?
Mm.
I'm primarily thinking about your music career.
Oh my gosh, there's been just so many of these. You and I have had a similar journey where we just keep pivoting and finding the next thing that's interesting. And by the way, I actually think that's how we're designed. There's no straight lines in nature, right? It's always moving. And I think that it's fun when you just keep letting yourself try new things. I had a music career. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I wanted to be a recording artist. I got a record deal at Interscope. I was sitting next to Lady Gaga. She was recording paparazzi. And I was just like, wow, this woman is amazing. And later on, I got dropped from that record label. And then a friend of mine was like, now it's time to become an adult and give up on your dream, as if this was like being responsible. That's not going to happen. So you have to get a real job, right? It's so funny, these stories that people tell you. So I said to her, what's a real job? She's like, you could work in real estate because those people make a lot of money. So, as fate would have it, the next day I was standing in line at the Cheesecake Factory and there was a man standing in front of me. And he's like, you have a really good personality. And we start talking. And he's like, why don't you come work for me? I sell $100 million shopping centers. I work in commercial real estate. I'm like, oh, my friend just said that to me yesterday. I know nothing about it, but I'll come work for you. So I go work for this billionaire. And he and I would just have these like long philosophical conversations. And he thought I was really cool. And I thought he was cool. I liked his wife. I liked their little dog. I liked his daughter. And he's, oh my gosh, I just love having you around the house. Like, we're going to teach you the ropes. And I start making a couple $100,000. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot of money for a 25-year-old. And 2 years later, I saw myself inside of the mirrored elevator doors. And I'm looking at myself going up to this office with my like double breasted suit and my high heel. And I'm like, who is that girl? And I started crying. I was like, I came out here with a guitar in my hand. I came out here to be a songwriter. And now I've like sold out. I've sold my soul because I can eat spicy tuna rolls. I could afford it. This isn't that interesting. Like some people are so poor, all they have is money. Like I didn't feel like I was being authentic. So I went to him and said, I'm going to quit. And he was very supportive. And he's follow your dreams. And then quickly I was like, wait, what did I do? My parents have been divorced since I was a kid. I don't have any money. My parents have no money to give me. What am I thinking? And then my grandmother used to say that necessity is the mother of invention. So I started to ask better questions. Is there any other way that I can make music without being a recording artist? And I found an article on Google that talked about licensing music to TV shows. I was like, wait, I never thought of that. So that became my focus. I started calling ad agencies and film studios and TV networks and asking them, can I write a song for your show? Can I write a song for your ad? Can I write a song for your movie? And funny enough, the cold calling I had done for real estate actually made me feel very fearless making these phone calls. I was calling people with net worths of $500 million asking if they wanted to take a meeting about a shopping center that they would wanted to sell them. So it was so much easier to then just call an ad agency and say, do you have an ad I can write for Pepsi? And I wound up becoming really successful at that. And I was making, as a songwriter, probably 300 grand a year. And my friends were like, how are you doing that? Like, I'm just doing what you guys didn't think to do. Instead of taking out a hat on a subway platform and playing 3 songs, I'm using the same time in my day to make calls that you probably would be scared to make. And it's what you said before. The only reason I could make that phone call was I dropped the story of I'm not enough and I'm going to make a fool of myself. I was like, I don't care what they think. This is my life. Why am I going to let fear stand in the way of my future? And so I would fly out to Leo Burnett in Chicago. I would fly out to New York City. I would fly out to wherever it was to meet with ad agencies, even Minnesota, because there's a bunch of ad agencies there. I wrote songs for Target and McDonald's. And then 10 years later, 10 years of doing that, I had 3 kids by then. And I thought I was like the happiest person in the world because I beat the system. I started teaching songwriters how they could do that. And so songwriters would come over one on one. Next thing I know, a friend was like, why don't you do this online? So I'm like, online? I don't have an online presence to speak of, but I taught a class online on Zoom before people even knew what Zoom was in 2015. It was called Six Figure Songwriting. I made $2 million teaching that class in the first year. I was charging $1,000 to hundreds of songwriters were like, I want you to tell me because it's your real live. And I remember thinking the day before I decided to do that class, why am I teaching this class? I'm not Taylor Swift. I'm not Lady Gaga. Oh, but they're not teaching it. This is what I do. I might not be a household name, but I'm like a person who's actually doing this over and over. So I started that class, couldn't believe the results, started helping so many songwriters get their songs out. And then one of the songwriters in the class said to me, you should start a podcast. My husband works for Adam Carolla and you have such a good personality. So I'm 45. So when I was 37, I started a podcast and I had 3 kids at this time, 3 little kids, toddlers. Started the podcast. It was called Don't Keep Your Day Job. It was about how you don't have to do something you hate that sucks. You can actually get paid to do something you love. Even if you're not Beyonce, you could still make some money doing the thing you like. And I wanted to show people there was that middle ground and the podcast did well. And then once we hit 40 million downloads, we switched it into the new podcast, which is called Abundant Ever After, which we've been doing for 3 years about what's really underneath. How do you get to flow state? How do you get to that place where you can make those phone calls? You're not afraid. You can write the songs. You're just allowing stuff to flow through you. And so that's a little bit been about the songwriting journey and how it led me to here.
Yeah, it's all about the pivot and knowing when to pivot, but being able to access that within yourself because I think a lot of us will get stuck in a particular scenario or think that we're stuck. And so we just keep going because it's the next logical step. This is a safe play. This is what I should be doing. We look at it from that standpoint of you need to grow up or get that real job and because it's what everybody else is doing. So what gives you the grit to be able to make that pivot and to know that it's the right thing for you?
When I was growing up, my mom suffered from severe depression and tried to end her life a couple times. And my dad left, and she was just never able to function really. And she still suffers that way, like literally doesn't leave the house. She's one of those stories of a person who's such a deep soul, and yet her whole life is the TV and the couch. And I think that really, in a way, was like a very powerful teacher because it gave me this is what you don't want to happen. You want to be the opposite. You want to feel so filled with life. If you go to a gym and you build muscle, sometimes you're pushing against something, right? And it's the pushing against something that actually allows you to soar like a phoenix. So I think that just the sheer sadness and abandonment and pain that happened in my childhood gave me the drive to push against it and to say, no, life is not designed for people to be that miserable. Life is designed for us to thrive. And I'm going to be 100% all in on that.
I love that. All in. And I
Hmm.
think it's something that it's definitely a skill that you have to build. And it's by doing those small things over a long period of time and having those small successes that allow you to get to that place that you're willing to step into that arena and actually do that. How can someone recognize when their ego is running the show and shift their mindset into abundance into their life?
It's such a great question because I think we're all going unconscious some of the day when the ego kind of takes hold and either tells you, nah, you're not really going to work out today. Come on, it's too hard. Sit down, don't go. Or no, why don't you pick a fight with your spouse? Or no, the ego just shows up quite often. And that's why I think it is really important to begin to practice noticing it. Fear is so boring. It just lulls you to sleep. And I think when you're not in ego, when you're feeling inspired, you're feeling inspired. There have been days where I've had no sleep and I have more energy than ever because energy doesn't come from sleep. It comes from your state of being. And so I think that I actually used to do this. I don't do it anymore because it's now like routine, but I used to set a little reminder on my phone that would pop up and say, check in. Are you conscious?
Yeah.
Right? Have you become unconscious? And I've learned so much about the brain and how when you wake up in the morning, it replays the same thoughts that it sent to you yesterday. And what's really scary about that is not just that you'll think what you thought yesterday, but it'll make you feel what you felt yesterday because thoughts create feelings. Some thoughts make you feel alive. Some thoughts make you feel terrible. Some thoughts create serotonin in the brain and body. Some thoughts create cortisol, which is more addictive than nicotine. So if you're waking up thinking what you thought yesterday and those thoughts are really heavy, that means you're going to feel biologically the way you felt yesterday, which actually can make you feel pretty sick. And after a while, you don't even recognize your life anymore. And the opposite is also true. And so I try to teach people like a really simple meditation practice. I'll say the same way that you select your clothes every day, I want you to take 90 seconds and select how do I want to feel today? How do I want to feel? Do I want to feel like ease, joy, spontaneity? And then I want you to close your eyes and like picture yourself going through your day feeling ease. What would it feel like? What would it look like? And you're in charge now, not your unconscious program. You become the mind. And it works. It really starts to work. If you listen to Wayne Dyer or Tony Robbins or Deepak Chopra, every person who's ever tried to help any of us to the path of self development, it's about changing your energy. You change your energy, you change your life. You change your story, you change your life. It's all the same. So many different practices can get you there. But I think we don't recognize how a tiny little shift, if you were on a boat and you shift 2 degrees and you keep going, you don't wind up 2 degrees from where you would have been. You wind up in a different continent. That's how different the flight path becomes when you just change course 2 degrees. So if you can change your state of mind 2 degrees in the morning, you're going to wind up with a very different day. And then you won't relive Groundhog Day every day because it's Groundhog Day. If you think the way you thought and you feel what you felt, then you're going to do what you did. And your results become a pattern based on how you think and how you feel. It creates what you do and then what the results of your life look like, your health, your wealth, your relationships. So we have to change how we feel and tap into something that's much more awake and conscious. And just that's why I wrote the book, because we don't recognize how unconscious we are going through our life and then creating the same result of something that just, it feels like it's the story of this old self. And one thing I'll just say is when I meditate for real, if I sit down and do a 10-minute meditation, a 20-minute meditation, my goal is to access the part of me that is nobody, nowhere, in no time. not this story, not this somebody identity that I've been carrying around. When I say nobody, nowhere, and no time, it's like connecting to the part of me that's so much bigger than time, my soul, part of me that comes from God, the part of me that can really create, the part of me that really is connected to the source of all, right? It doesn't care about the little story of where I grew up or what my parents went through. It's like my consciousness, who I really am. That's the part of you that can create an unlimited life because that's the part of you that's not creating from this small, tiny little self that doesn't feel worthy to create anything.
Do you ever imagine that your consciousness is actually someplace else, that it's non-local and you're actually just trying to pull things from the ether?
100%. And it's not local.
Yeah.
I love that you can perceive that, but
Yeah.
it's not local.
It's just an
Um,
avatar. Yeah.
it is. It really actually is. It's interesting. Like, Einstein said that the world is not made of three dimensions, but he said that the eyeball only sees things in three dimensions. So it's a lie. Because if you really could see the way certain instruments, certain things in a lab could show you that the world is actually made of 10 dimensions, you're thinking that everything is local and separate and all of this. And really, it's this one geometric pattern. If you were to actually see the world as it actually is, you would be amazed that your body, while you're sleeping, is tracking the circadian rhythm of the sun and stars. It knows what's happening so much light years away from you. How? Because it's actually connected, plugged into all that. So your mind story is such a lie because it keeps you so limited when, whether you know it or not, you're completely connected to something that's so beyond space and time. I say to people, how long is a day on Earth? They're like 24 hours. Like,
Yeah.
great. How long is a day on Jupiter? They're like, I never thought that question. I don't even know the answer. I'm like, the answer is 9 hours and 58 minutes. And I'm like, how long is a day outside of this solar system? The answer is it evaporates. There's no time. There's no time. So if you pull back, if you zoom out from the creator's perspective, from God's perspective, the past, present, and future is happening when? Now. Time has been collapsed, right? Einstein could see this. He perceived this, which means you can be ahead of your time. You can make a quantum leap. Like you said, your future, your soul already knows your past, present, and future. It's only operating from a place where it's all already happening now. Now,
I do wanna highlight a tool that you gave just a few minutes ago, and I think it's really important for people to hone in on the power of a self check-in, and the fact that you can set an alarm, but not only can you set an alarm, you can actually name your alarms for different things. And so for me, in a time period in my life where I was going through some difficulty, my alarm was "You are loved," and it was just a constant reminder that love is always out there, but you have to be that love in order to receive that love back in return. Otherwise, you're putting up this imaginary barrier and you become the perpetrator of your own pain in that process because we're not allowing ourselves to receive what's actually out there because you're not even perceiving it. You don't recognize it when it's in front of you
right.
because you can't.
Honestly, that was the biggest gift that I received in my life. When I graduated from college, I went on this trip to Jerusalem for 3 weeks and I thought I was going to leave. And then I just kept extending my trip and I was there for 3 years. And what was so powerful to me was this idea of love, because in my household, love was something that really didn't exist. Like, you can call it love, but is it love if it walks out the door and never comes back? That's not really unconditional. Is it love if it's such neediness that if you leave, I'm going to kill myself? Was that love? What is love? I don't get it. Right. So when I was living in Israel and I met these amazing people and I was living with this rabbi and his wife and their 7 children, they were so unconditionally plugged in. They were so loving. They were so kind. And I said to them, I can't believe you're letting me stay here. I was 21. It's not like I had any clout. I wasn't bringing them anything. I wasn't bringing them money. I wasn't bringing them prestige. I was just like a girl that they met walking in Jerusalem and they were like, oh, you can stay with us. And they just kept extending how long I could stay. And they didn't have a lot. They had so little. They had 7 children in 2 bedrooms and everybody was so happy. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember saying to the rabbi, why is this? And he said, because love is not earnable. Love is a gift. And I said, "Does God need me to do things to be loved?" And he was like, "No." He said, If God was like the sun, you'd be a ray of that light." He said, "You are a masterpiece, a piece of the master, and you are a vehicle for God's light in the world. And so you are loved, and you not only that, but you carry a love that's more powerful than what you could even know, because it's a love that's greater than, it's not from you, right? It's from, but you can carry it into the world. It's like electricity. Electricity, our bodies are the light bulb, our soul is the light, and God is lighting that lamp. And we're all connected in that. Everybody has that capacity, but some people, they're in resistance mode. They turn that off, and then they don't allow themselves to literally be this like walking portal of love. And something really crazy happened. I went to a lab at UC San Diego, and I was looking at, this scientist was showing me pancreatic cancer cells in an incubator. And then they brought in 10 meditators, and then we left the room and we came back in, and the meditators, these monks were meditating love into this lab, and they changed the pancreatic cancer cells, because that's what love does. Love is a creative force, and it opens hearts and it heals. It's amazing. So he said that the people at the lab were actually getting stressed out about this experiment, because what does it mean if that's true? How much more power could people tap into? They would need less pharmaceuticals, and then that'd be a problem for the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm not saying you don't need any pharmaceuticals. I took a Tylenol earlier because I had a headache. But I am making the case that there is a power inside of us that literally is the most impressive thing. Like, people tell me all the time how they don't think they're enough. I'm like, the most impressive thing anyway is not what grades you got in school or how much money you have. It's how much compassion, empathy, passion, and creativity you have. And you have that in spades. You're just not allowing it to show up, but it's in you. And when you walk in a room and you're loving and passionate and creative, it's of course you're going to manifest as much money as you want, because that's the 3D version of the energy that you're not even realizing you can harness in space.
Yeah, another tool I want to give people here that I found useful for myself were post-it notes up on a mirror of all the things that I would like to become. Who I believe that I am now and who I'm capable of becoming is a
Oh,
word I often use. And one of the reminders that I gave myself was that I'm still a part of the ocean. And it goes back to that place of being love and being able to love others in that same, and just recognizing that you are part of a greater whole, a greater collective. And even though you believe that it's completely outside of you, that the only way I can get love, I have to get it. It's something that I have to get. I have to run someplace. I have to find somebody. And that somebody is going to complete me. But it doesn't work that way, because you have to be able to give that love, like you said, in spades, in order to then also receive it or be able to even see it.
it's so fascinating how it is so pervasive, this idea that everything that we could ever want is somewhere outside of us. And that is the biggest lie. I think about my grandmother who came from nothing. And yet I would go to the grocery store with her, and she would ask the checkout person, "Have you had a hug today?" And then they would look at her like she was crazy. And then she was like, "No, really, like, I'm giving you a hug." And then people would literally cry because she really meant it. And she was so abundant in those moments. And then things would happen to her, like people would just pay for her groceries, or they would say, "You know what? This one's on me." It's like, why? Because she wasn't asking for that. She was bringing it. Like,
Yeah.
we bring the love. Think about, I had to get my car serviced a couple weeks ago, and I get there and they have this amazing coffee maker machine. So I'm like using the machine. I'm like, this is fine. And then there's a woman sitting next to me, and she was so angry that she couldn't get to work because the car was going to take so long to get fixed. And I said, maybe God just wants to give you a day off. And then she started crying. She's, "I'm so overworked. I'm so tired. I didn't look at it that way." I said, here you are. You have air conditioning. You have a phone. You can listen to podcasts. You can't do anything about it. They're going to work on the phone for all these hours. What if you're being forced to slow down and not work today? She was like, "I can't believe you just said that." I'm like, and then I realized how even in the car service place, I can have a good time, because when you realize that you can bring love, you become so lit up. You're just like, oh my God, all day long. It's like being in a video game and collecting gold coins. It's so easy to make someone feel good. It's so easy to give somebody back a feeling of vitality. I was at a sushi restaurant. This is just a fun story. My dad died in July, and I spent a few weeks in hospice with him, and then the funeral, and it was a pretty depressing but beautiful, heartbreaking but beautiful sort of few weeks. And then my kids wanted to go to a movie to see the Minions movie, so we go out to dinner right before the movie, and I wasn't feeling like myself. So I thought to myself, no, look for a moment where you could give love to a stranger because it'll make you feel great. So I turned to the couple that's sitting next to me and I said, can I buy you guys dessert? And she's, oh my God, that's so nice. I was like, I'm buying you guys dessert. So she says, give me your telephone number so we can stay in touch. I'm like, fine. So I leave and I say to her, were you guys on a first date? You looked really cute. She texts me. She's like, thank you for the dessert, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, yeah, that was a first date. And she said, I wanted to thank you because I'm a widow, she said. And that was the first date I've been on in 5 years since my husband died. And she said, when you bought me the dessert, it felt like a wink from the universe. Like it's safe to date again and love again. And I said, well, that's really fascinating and beautiful. And I said, my dad just died on July 3rd. And I said, this is the first time I went out since then. And I actually wanted to do something nice for you because it made me feel better. And then she said, oh, funny enough, my husband died on July 3rd, 5 years ago. And I'm telling you that the amount of stories in my life that happened like that, it's insane.
That's
When I first moved to LA, I was looking at this apartment and I told the lady it's a little out of my price range. And we're walking down the stairs to the sidewalk. And this woman who's like probably 70 years old walks over to me. She's, are you going to rent that apartment? And I'm like, I don't know. It's a little out of my price range, but I'm thinking about it. She said, every girl who rents that apartment moves out at the end of the year because they keep getting engaged. So there's really good luck. So I said, okay, I'll take it. And that woman walked away. She must have lived in the building somewhere. And it turned out that my husband is her son. And
what?
I wound up meeting her son and because he would come visit her. And it's crazy. But I'm just telling you, my whole life is like that. And what I'm saying is when you don't wait for something outside of you, but you realize there is synchronicity in every day. If you woke up every day and said, I know there's gonna be solar synchronicities today, I guarantee you're gonna find it. And then you're gonna be like, oh my God, is my life the Truman Show? Is this for real? And it is for real. And that's the funnest game to play. Is there is so much magic every day, and I can't wait to see it because I know it's here. When you have that outlook, you become a blessing to the world. And I'm telling you, you'll be just like drowning in blessings. You won't believe it. Be everywhere.
So right now, there's people listening to this going, yeah, she's tapped in, tuned in, turned on. That's great. Must be nice. What do you tell that person?
Here's the thing. When I ask people what you want to manifest in your life, most people make a list for me and they say $10 million, a beautiful house, a new relationship, and all of that. And I'm like, great. I actually think you should have all that. I actually think we're meant to have both material and spiritual wealth. And then I say, but I believe that you have way bigger dreams than that. I actually don't think you came to the world for a pile of things. I don't. I think you want a mystical experience every day. I think you want to feel creative and connected and significant. That's what you want. And every time they always say that's true. So if somebody says to me, you're tapped in and turned on, but it doesn't work for me, my real question is usually I say, listen, you just told me the things that you want. Why do you think you want those things? Why do you want the Range Rover? Why do you want the $10 million? And when you get down to it, the reason they want it every time is because of how they believe it will make them feel. So I'm like, so you're telling me, you're looking at me like, yeah, she's tapped in, but I want all this stuff and I can't find it. And then I help them see that what they really want is how they think it'll make them feel. They want the peace that the money will bring.
Yeah.
They want the feeling of abundance that they're going to feel. They want the feeling of love that they're going to feel when they finally find this person, right? They think it's going to come from that.
Safety, security.
So then I say, why would you wait for something to happen to make you feel that good when you could feel that good right now? What? Why wouldn't you just feel that good? And it's so interesting. It's because we are addicted to feeling like crap. Cortisol is literally addictive. It's more addictive than nicotine. Your body starts to feed off of it. And it says, don't you dare go to the gym and feel good. Not today. Do it tomorrow. I like this cortisol. Don't you dare fall in love. That's going to feel too vulnerable. Don't you do that. That's not safe. Stay with the cortisol. Stay with the cortisol. Literally. And you have, just like you have to get your body off of sugar sometimes, you have to get yourself off that cortisol and say, no, I'm done feeling bad. I'm done. I want to feel that good. I want to actually feel that good now. And every year I usually go away for a silent meditation retreat for a week. And I come back and I feel the best that I have felt. And I feel so alive. And it doesn't come from piles of money. It comes from tapping into the quantum. It comes from feeling that part of me that you were talking about before that's not local. That's
Yeah.
what it comes from. And why would you deny yourself finding that part of you when you could literally let yourself feel that good? And what might change in your life when you feel that good and your vibration becomes such a blessing to yourself and to other people? Why would you say no to that? I was at a retreat I was leading once, and this woman raised her hand and she said, what if I want to feel like 50% happier? And I said, why wouldn't you want 100%?
100, yeah.
And she said, that's probably not possible. And I'm like, with your physical health, would you settle for feeling like garbage 80% of the time? No, you'd run to a doctor. You'd be like, 80% of the day, I have a headache and I feel nauseous. That doesn't fly. Nobody would think that was okay because we have a standard which says you shouldn't feel a runny nose and you shouldn't feel a headache. And if you do feel it, you should get over it in 3 days or else you need to call a doctor. We don't tolerate feeling bad physically. We all of a sudden know something's wrong. But if we have a low mental state, we say, oh, that's just normal. That's not true. Who's benefiting? It's because we think we're being irresponsible. If we feel joy, we think we're somehow robbing someone down the street of feeling good if we're feeling good. Like people will be happy to post that they're eating healthier and they'll declare to other people, look, I'm being so healthy because they want to inspire other people to be healthy. But they wouldn't say, I'm so happy. I'm so in love with life. They would feel crazy because they think other people will say, who is she to be that happy? I'm
Right.
not. As if you're taking their happiness by you being happy with your life. It's madness. It's got to stop. What about the opposite? What about you saying, I'm so happy. I'm so connected to the equanimity. Even though there's pain in my life, I'm finding purpose in it. And I'm doing this and I'm feeling that. It's like, why, why not decide that can inspire someone that they can have that too?
Yeah, I think a lot of people dismiss what it took for that individual person to get to where they are now. They completely dismiss everything that happened prior to that
Mm.
because all they can see is what's on social media. And so they just make this assumption about someone else's life and say, must be nice. I can't have that though.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I was on a show yesterday and they said to me, do you think that there's a greater feeling than happiness? And I said, yeah, I think happiness is not really even it. I think it's about equanimity. I really think there's a deeper place. There's something greater than happy. It's a feeling of being okay with all that is.
Yeah.
Because life is lifey. Like life has like turns and twists and there's pain. The pain is inevitable, but the suffering is optional. And in life, when you can, like my mindfulness teacher used to say, every morning have a glass of tea and invite all parts of you to the table. The parts of you that self sabotage, the parts of you that are brilliant, the parts of you that are fearless, the parts of you that are broken, and just welcome it all. Right. And then what happens is that actually does feel deeper than joy because you come to terms with, oh my gosh, like it's the way we're all going to feel when we're 85. When you get to 85, you start to find peace with yourself. You become authentic. You look at your blessings. You're grateful for every day. And I think it's that state of being. It's not flippant, superficial happiness. It's a deep being at peace with everything that is, right? You make peace with your flaws, which allows you to give other people permission to not be perfect. I think that state of deep peace is really what we're looking for.
Throughout this entire podcast, we've danced around the law of reception, but can you explain it and what it means for someone and how they can expand their capacity to receive the good that's already available to them?
Yeah. First of all, you did such a good job with this conversation because I feel like if you've been listening up until now, anyone who's listening, it's a really good preamble to what I'm about to say. When I was living in Jerusalem, the law of attraction became really popular in the States. and people were watching The Secret and all of that. And my rabbi said, I want you to understand from a Jewish perspective, we wouldn't say the law of attraction, we would say the law of reception. And I said, oh, why would you say the law of reception? And he said, because the word Kabbalah, literally that Hebrew word means to receive. And so that's the job of each of us on the planet is to receive as much as possible. And then I started understanding like a light bulb, some light bulbs can receive 45 watts, some light bulbs can receive 75 watts. And the idea is how much light can you actually receive, right? How much electricity can you receive? And so he gave this metaphor of a radio. And he said, if you turn on a radio, you would hear music. And then the next question I would ask you is, where on earth was the music before you turned on the radio? And I thought, I've never thought of that. And he said, the only answer is that it was already here, hidden in plain sight, but you needed a certain frequency to unearth it, to be able to hear it. And then he said, and with that same radio, you could go station by station, and then different songs that were all hidden in plain sight can become your experience. And so he said, that's actually how life works. It's already here, it's already done. Everything is in escrow for you. The name of the game is, where is your frequency tuned? Because that will determine what you've actually received based on what you're tuned to, which is why, how did you and I meet? Same frequency. How did I meet Mark Groves, which is how you heard me? Same frequency. How did I meet my husband? Same frequency. Your frequency determines. That's why when people say to each other, we're really on the same wavelength, the
Yeah.
answer is yes, legit. And so you don't change your life by wearing better clothes or having more impressive things to say on your resume. It's your energy that will tune the dial to a totally different quantum leap in your life. You could have two sisters who grew up in the same house, and one has one energy and one has another, and they'll live totally different lives, right? Not based on their last name, not based on who their parents were, but based upon the energy they bring into a space, right? And that's what's so cool is that if we just continue to manipulate our own energy and bring it to a place that's very awake and receptive and loving and wise, the most amazing things show up in your life.
And as we bring this to a close, can you tell us the Christmas lights story?
Good. I love Christmas. I love
Yeah. Well, I was
Christmas.
gonna say you could actually take the rooster story and the Christmas lights story and make them into a children's book, a little parable.
We should. We
Yeah.
should because they're both so beautiful. Thank you. That's such a nice thing to say. So sweet. I've just always loved Christmas lights, but during COVID, my kids, like a lot of kids, just they missed a lot of things. They couldn't go to school. They were on Zoom. They were miserable. And so I said to my husband, this year for Christmas, we're going to be insane. We're going to literally have the best Christmas lights show in the world. And so I went to Home Depot, bought every box of lights, plus the blow up Santa, plus the Buddy the Elf, plus the reindeer, everything. My husband's, oh my God, she's actually lost her mind. It's crazy. So I buy all this stuff. And then he keeps saying to me as these two sweet guys are like putting the lights up for days, December like 19th and 20th, quickly putting them up. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I'm like, you're so negative. You're so negative. I'm just telling you, you're not listening because you're moving so fast and you always move so fast. It's not going to work. So I'm like, he's so down on my dream. Sure enough, we go to turn on the lights and he was right. But I couldn't figure out what was happening. So we kept trying and trying again. And where were all these lights? We spent all this money on these lights. And then I go inside the house, all the lights are off, the refrigerator's off, the computer's off. I'm like, what's happening? And he's, come with me. So we go into the garage with the two guys that helped me put the lights on. And he opens up the breaker and he goes, you literally don't have enough on the breaker to hold the light. He goes, it's a simple mathematical equation. Look at all the boxes and add up the wattage on every box. It's written how many watts. And now look how many watts you have on the breaker. He goes, that's why I told you it wouldn't work. The only way this would have worked is if days before you would have called an electrician and if he would have added to the breaker, and then you would have been able to hold more power. And I thought, that is such an amazing metaphor for what I'm trying to teach. when we are coming from the mind where we started this episode, talking about the little self and all the negatives, we don't have any power to hold and receive the most beautiful life, the most beautiful love in our life. Even if we had love come in our life, we'd just sabotage it. We'd blow a fuse, so to speak. Matthew Perry was talking about in his memoir, like he had all these beautiful women in his life and he just didn't feel good enough about himself. And so he would just sabotage his relationships. He didn't have the circuitry to hold that kind of love because he didn't feel it for himself. So he talks about Julie Roberts, he let her get away. He can't believe it. And that is a story that everybody can relate to. So when we open up that light bulb inside ourselves, we feel the oneness, the wholeness, we make peace with all of our flaws, all of that, we open up the circuitry that we can receive so much more.
Cathy, thank you for such an amazing conversation.
You're the sweetest. I love talking to you. I knew from the second that you came on, I was like, oh my God, he's such a kind soul and you're going to do such amazing things in your life.
Thank you. Tell everybody how they can reach you and how they can work with you.
They can. First of all, you can listen to my podcast, Abundant Ever After. You can buy
Which
the
you
book.
should.
Yes, you should. You should buy the book, Abundant Ever After. We're going to do a 21-day manifestation of the most abundant year challenge that starts January 1st. You can find out all the information if you go to cathyheller.com/book, or you can come to Instagram and there's always information there at cathy.heller. But I really appreciate just the intention and the way that you care about other people, because I can feel the way you care about me. I can feel the way you care about your listeners, and it's very rare and it's very special, and I don't take it for granted.
Cathy, thank you so much.
My pleasure.